Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. As promised, I am going to give you my projections for this March Madness tournament. If you can't tell already, this is one of my favorite times of year. I love basketball. Football will always be my number one sport, especially college football. But basketball is a really, really close number two. I love basketball. It's just the regular season, especially with the NBA, which I do follow a lot more closely than college. Which is weird for me because in football it's the exact opposite. I follow and invest a lot more into college football than into the NFL. Still love the NFL, but primarily I am a college football person. So with basketball, the seasons are just super, super long, and the games kind of get repetitive. Same thing with like hockey and sports like that. Very, very games just get repetitive. But in this type of year where it's do or die, especially in March Madness, it's single elimination, do or die. Obviously, the best team doesn't always win. If the best team always won, the one seeds would win the March Madness tournament every year. But it is not like that. The best teams don't always win. Good teams get hot, know when to get hot at the right time, and bad teams sometimes just choke the game away. You know, of course, last year was a complete anomaly. We had all number one seeds in the Final Four. And no one wanted to watch that last year. That was just kind of boring. And there was really no upsets. I really, really hope that was just kind of an anomaly. With this new NIL era, though, that could be a more of the norm in these future March Madness tournaments. I just really hope that that's not like that, and it's just not. There's no upsets anymore. There's not like any upsets, or there's no Cinderella teams anymore. Stuff like that. I do know that that is probably going to be less and less common with NIL, but it's still really nice to see those every once in a while. You know what I mean? So, let's just get into it here. Obviously, with me being an Ohio State fan, this tournament has, it's a lot more excitement for me because this is the first time Ohio State has been in the tournament for, I believe, like 5 years. Bruce Thornton is going to get his first shot in the tournament. Ohio State had a really, really good showing in the Big Ten Championship tournament. Had the win over, I believe, or the win over Iowa, and then played really, really hard against Michigan. And Michigan, whether you like them or hate them, obviously, since I'm an Ohio State fan, I hate them. They are one of the best teams in the country. They're the number one. They have a number one seed for a reason. And we'll get more into them once we get to Michigan here in the bracket. But Ohio State had a really, really good showing against Michigan. Played really hard, had a shot to win the game, but Michigan was just too much. They ended up moving on, going to the championship of the Big Ten tournament and losing to Purdue, which was really, really interesting. We'll talk about more about my opinion of Purdue once we get there, of course. But Michigan ends up losing to Purdue in the Big Ten tournament. And Ohio State basically, with their win over Iowa in the tournament, basically clinches themselves into the tournament if they hadn't clinched themselves already. I already said in my previous video, go back and watch that, please. Ohio State did their job by beating Iowa in the tournament. Ohio State was really going to sweat this out if they were going to be, a one and done type, a team in the tournament, kind of like Indiana was. Even though Indiana was kind of on the brink, Ohio State was a little bit off the bubble at that point. But still, Indiana, it was do or die for Indiana, and they died. They're not in the tournament this year, and they look to be in a really, really good position to make a tournament run a few months ago, but that is just how things can flip, especially in college basketball where consistency isn't always guaranteed for every single team, or is never guaranteed for every single team. And, that's what's really, really exciting about baseball, or basketball, I'm sorry, not baseball. With college basketball specifically, these teams are always not going to be the highest quality of teams. They're not the NBA. Most of these people that are playing in this tournament, they will have their final games here ever playing as an athlete in college in this tournament. And, and that's kind of what makes it fun. It's more regional. There's a lot more pride that comes into this with different teams, coming from different backgrounds, whether it's, Duke, the basketball school, the high blue blood, or, BYU, the team from Utah, the Mormons. And, they everyone comes from all different backgrounds, every, upbringing, different stuff like that. And it does not matter who you are, what your ethnicity is, what religion you are, what religion that you have, you are, whatever you want to say, when you step onto the court, you're wearing a jersey and you have your teammates behind you and you have the opponent in front of you. That's all that matters. And it's do or die. And this is why I love this time of year. If it hasn't been clear already, my family is super, super into sports, but this especially is really, really, we get really, really excited for this. And we, talk about this once it starts getting kind of ramped up, we have talks about it, and we talk back and forth about who we think is good, who we think is bad, stuff like that. So let's just jump into it because I've kind of rambled on here for a while. So let's just jump into this. Of course, we're gonna start off. Shocker, brace yourself. Duke is moving on. And I don't really see a shot where Duke is upsetted in the first round. This is not going to be a year where the 16 seed are going to move on to any of these tournaments. I'm just going to make that perfectly clear. I'm going to come back to Ohio State and TCU because I do have a lot of thoughts on that game, obviously. St. John's and Northern Iowa. I think St. John's is a lot better than a 5th seed. They beat UConn by 20 points, I think, during the regular season. And UConn is a 2 seed. So I really, really think that St. John's did kind of get screwed in the sense of every sense of the word right now because they are the 5th seed. They have a harder shot or a harder path because they have to, if they get that far, they have to play, Duke or TCU or Ohio State in the Sweet 16. That's a harder path than, a UConn team that might have to play, UCLA, UCF, Michigan State, Louisville, South Florida. Those teams are a lot, not less, because there's obviously some teams are better in that group than others. But, because UConn is the higher seed, I'm not saying that St. John's should be ranked above UConn, but I do think that St. John's should probably have gotten a 3 to 4 seed. I don't know about 2 seed. I think that's a little high, but I think St. John's should have been slotted into the 3 or 4 seed. But with that being said, I am going to take St. John's there against Northern Iowa. I do think this game is going to be a little bit closer than people are expecting. Fun fact, actually, last year St. John's was my pick to win the entire tournament. I don't really remember how far they got, but I know they didn't win. So hopefully St. John's doesn't burn me again this year. Kansas and CA Baptist, I don't see a world where Kansas loses that game, really. Maybe it's a close game. I don't see it, though. South Florida and Louisville. This game is going to be interesting. I've seen a lot of people. Let's just look at the stats here. I obviously don't follow Louisville or South Florida very closely. I do have a few personal connections to the University of South Florida in football, if we're going to make that kind of discussion, even though that has nothing to do with this. They had a really, really good season in football, for their standards at least. But, overwhelmingly it looks like that Louisville is favored to beat you, South Florida, but I don't know, man. They're close. I think I am right now. You know what? It's March. Let's do it. I'm going to pick South Florida to move on and that is going to be my first upset in this bracket. Now, Michigan State and North Dakota State. I do have Michigan State moving on. I do not think Michigan State is as dangerous as people are putting out them to be. I do think Michigan exposed some of their stuff. Michigan State is definitely trying to be a basketball school. Their donors and all that stuff, they're all pouring it into basketball. Right now it's working, where Michigan State is still a top 3 seed, of course, in their region, but it's not Michigan, where Michigan is, consistently putting out a top basketball program ever since Dusty May came into the picture. They've been a top tier basketball program, and then the past few years they've kind of fallen off in their football program. But we can't forget that Michigan was winning national championships and making playoffs in football. So there's a balance that Michigan has that Michigan State just doesn't. But I do think that Michigan State moves on against North Dakota State. I think Michigan State probably wins pretty convincingly there. This game right here, UCLA and UCF. I am really tempted to go UCF here off of just the fact alone that I cannot stand UCLA's head coach. I can't stand him. The fact that he, ejects his players, like not even from with the refs, help or anything. He just says, "Go to the locker room. You're not sitting on my bench." And stuff like that, where he calls out reporters and stuff like. I don't like him. He's not a very good, person off the court. I feel like, and maybe that kind of what brings they obviously are succeeding UCLA, as a 7 seed. They made the tournament. But, I don't know what that does in the long term. Maybe that brings out the best of of UCLA's players in this tournament. But I just don't like it. Maybe call me soft, call me whatever. I'm not a big fan of UCLA and their coach. So that way I'm really, really tempted to take UCF here, but I am going to go ahead and take UCLA. I just think that this game is close. I'm really, really, really tempted to take UCF in this game, but I think I got to use my head and not my heart. So I'm going to go ahead and take UCLA to move on in this tournament. UConn and Furman, I think UConn wins comfortably here. They move on with relative ease. Now, let's go back up to this Ohio State TCU game. And we'll click on the preview button here from ESPN. This is ESPN, by the way. I don't think if anyone did not realize that already. I am using the ESPN one. Their notable losses, of course, Ohio State losing to Illinois in the regular season. This was when Ohio State was kind of in their win-loss streak in the past like 3 months. It was super, super frustrating as an Ohio State fan. It looked like Ohio State would beat a quality team and then lose even more convincingly to a team that was kind of viewed as on their level. Of course, Illinois, we'll get to them later in this tournament. But Illinois, a quality team, only loses by 8. This was at home, though, so you got to account for that. Michigan, of course, we talked about those 2 losses. At home, Ohio State keeps it close against Michigan, ends up pulling away, especially on the road against Ohio State in Ann Arbor. Ohio State had a really, really good start to that game. I remember Michigan actually had one of their worst shooting performances of the season and still won by 12 in this game. Same thing with the win against Michigan and Columbus. Michigan actually kind of held the lead the majority of the game, and Ohio State was just kind of clawing back, and then they eventually ran out of gas, and Michigan just kind of took over in Columbus there. They did lose to Virginia. Not a great win, or not a great loss for Ohio State, if I'm being completely honest, at home. They showed fight, but just kind of they ran out of gas. That really, I guess it was a quality loss because Virginia is a decently good team. They are ranked pretty high in the tournament here, so they are a quality team. Just sucks that Ohio State could not get the job done against Virginia at home. Wisconsin. This was right at the end of the season where Ohio State went on that big hot streak. Right before, actually, but this was where, okay, we got some life here against Wisconsin, a quality team. Of course, Wisconsin is in this bracket here as the number 5 seed. If you look across from the East region, in the West region, Wisconsin is playing High Point as a 5 seed. So quality win in Columbus, and they destroyed Wisconsin right here. They got out on top of them and really never looked back. Wisconsin actually kind of brought it a little bit closer, but Ohio State pulled away right at the end. Michigan State. This is kind of closer than what the game honestly looked like. Michigan State was clearly the better team in this game, but Ohio State just kept it close. I think the home court advantage for Michigan State really did help. And then Ohio State beat Purdue. And, I'll talk about Purdue, obviously, when we get to Purdue. But this was a huge momentum builder for Ohio State. After this, we ended up beating Indiana, and then there's somebody else in between Indiana and Purdue that we went on this, I think it was 4-game winning streak at some point here. But they were not. I remember that team was not very good. They were one of the last teams in the conference. Remind me if anyone knows down below But yes, that Purdue game really a really good momentum builder for Ohio State coming into the tournament because they went on that big winning streak. This kind of got the ball rolling. It was like, oh my God, we can actually do this, you know. But of course, like I said, we beat Iowa in our first game of the Big Ten tournament, and then lose to Michigan in the quarterfinal of the tournament. So let's take a look at what the overall prediction here is. Of course, you can see up here that Ohio State is being favored in this game. Most people are picking Ohio State, but it is close. It is close. 63 to 37%. As an 8-9 game, that is kind of surprising. I do think that this game is going to be a little bit more closer than people are giving it credit for. This game is torturing me, by the way. I've been looking up so much stuff and having so many articles, and maybe I'm overthinking it a lot, but I have noticed that a lot of people are saying this game is going to fall on this man right here, Bruce Thornton. And while Bruce Thornton, yes, is going to be, if Bruce Thornton struggles in this game, Ohio State really has no chance. But when Bruce Thornton is on, Ohio State's very dangerous. But the thing is, I don't think that this game is going to be just on Bruce Thornton. I think the end-all be-all will be how good Tilly is in this game. If Ohio State can kind of do what they started to do against Michigan in like the end of the first half, beginning of the second half, again in the Big Ten tournament, and capitalize on the pick and rolls, and TCU leaves Tilly open, because TCU is a really good defensive team. They are kind of a score by committee type team, but they don't have a Bruce Thornton, where a guy that you're going to give Bruce Thornton the ball and everyone gets out of the way. No, TCU is kind of a score by committee type thing, which could be good for them in the tournament, but it could also be, pretty bad when you got who you go to when you need a shot to go down. Ohio State, you're going to go to Bruce Thornton. With TCU, I don't know if you have that guy. And maybe it's Devin Punch, but or David Punch, I'm sorry. But I don't know. I don't watch. I've actually never seen a TCU game all season, so I don't know how they operate here. Mobley, I think Mobley is going to give his points. He's going to get open for three in this game. It's just if he's going to make those shots, because all season he's been kind of streaky. He has been able to hit those shots. Like, I think it was the Wisconsin game where he nailed one. Should have been a foul, and a defender was all over him, and he just nailed it. It might have been Wisconsin. It also might have been Purdue. Ohio State, for sure, Ohio State won one of those games. But Mobley was on fire in that game, and that really took the pressure off of Bruce Thornton. Now I'm wondering if Tilly could be that guy to kind of take some of that pressure off of Thornton and not have Thornton kind of wear out like he did in some of Ohio State's losses. That has happened before, whether it was against Illinois or Pitt, when Ohio State lost by a buzzer beater to Pitt. Bruce Thornton kind of wore out because Bruce Thornton was doing everything, and that's no shot at Bruce Thornton. That's just kind of what happened, So that's kind of my thoughts. I think this game falls on Tilly. If Tilly cannot get going and can be a factor in the paint, defensively, anything. If he's not a factor in this game, I think Ohio State has no shot. But if he is, I really like Ohio State's chances in this game. So for that reason, do you even need to ask? I am going to pick Ohio State to move on and beat TCU. Very close, though. I do think that Tilly will be able to get enough things on both ends of the floor, whether it is through the pick and roll type offense that Ohio State has or can bring out, or is it if it's defensively against TCU in the paint. But let me move on down to the South region for Florida, and then it is either, I don't know who those teams are, I'm gonna be honest. So do we even need to ask? It's gonna be Florida. Florida is so dangerous. Oop, there we go. Florida is just so dangerous. In this tournament, they are obviously the defending national champions for a reason. Definitely a team to watch, and going to be one of the favorites to go back to back in this tournament. And I don't even remember the last time a team went back to back. It hasn't really been. I don't think it's been in my lifetime, at least, that a team's gone back to back in March Madness. I think some teams have been close, just not been able to get it. So watch out for Florida in this tournament. Then Clemson and Iowa. This game, like every 8 and 9 game, this game goes back and forth with me. Clemson is. Let's just take a look here. With notable losses coming from Alabama, a team that really does not play defense. That only, that's interesting. They lose to BYU, a top team that's honestly a pretty good loss. To only lose by 3 at BYU on the road. Lose to NC State, that's a rivalry game. Lose to Duke pretty handily, but yet again, Duke, one of the top team, the number 1 overall seed in this tournament, and it was on the road. So, or according to ESPN, it was on the road. I don't know. It might not have been. Louisville beats Louisville. Louisville, obviously a tournament team. At home, though, only won by 5, so you can kind of take those points into account there. And then split with North Carolina. Really, really good, but, that also is going to depend on, North Carolina's injuries. And we'll talk about North Carolina here in a little bit, and then lost to Duke. I believe this was in probably the tournament, actually. So this might not have been on the road, actually, either one of these games. I think probably this was the ACC tournament. But I think because, I don't know, hold on, let me go back to what Iowa has done, because I've followed Iowa a little bit more closely than Clemson. That's also because I've never watched a Clemson game, and the only Iowa game I've watched is Ohio State, so it technically counts. But let's go through. So they got destroyed by Michigan State on the road. Iowa State only lost by 4 on the road against Iowa State. Rivalry game, I'm not going to take that away from them. Losing to Illinois at home, which is not really great, but yet again, Illinois, one of the top teams in the country in this tournament, actually, too. Purdue losing on the road and then losing at home right there. That's concerning if I'm Iowa. Honestly, that game against Purdue at home, losing 78-57, that's concerning. I definitely think that this is a good loss. Only by 6 points on the road. Of course, I yet again, I did not watch this game, so I don't really know. I'm flying blind here. But if I'm just like looking at the scoreboard and I see, you lose 79-72 on the road against Purdue, is that really a bad thing? I don't think so. But you come home to Iowa City and you lose 78-57. That's bad. Only losing by over 21 points. Sorry. That's bad at home. You beat Nebraska at home by 6. You lose to Michigan, and you look pretty good against Michigan. You give Michigan all you can really have. I do remember that being a little bit of a scare for Michigan. Of course, only losing by 3 at home too, but also losing to Nebraska here. And of course, Iowa did lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament this year. But they also did beat Ohio State in Iowa City, and they destroyed Ohio State in Iowa City. That was kind of the right after the Michigan State game, and Ohio State fans kind of thought, oh, well, this is it. Now Ohio State's just going to crumble. They did the exact opposite, actually. But that's enough about Ohio State. This game does not concern Ohio State whatsoever. I'm looking at this game, and honestly, I don't like Iowa. That's the thing. I don't like Iowa. They're a Big Ten team, obviously, but I don't like Clemson even more. So for that reason, I'm going to go Iowa, and hopefully that turns out for me. Vanderbilt and McNeese. Vanderbilt's scary. Vanderbilt is hot right now. They are catching fire right at the right time. McNeese, a really, really good story, back in the tournament after making a really, really deep run last year. Actually, fun fact, 2 years ago, I had McNeese going all the way to, I think, the Elite Eight. And they, of course, I think lost in like the first or second round. And I was just a year off of McNeese. I do not think that McNeese has another one in them. I also don't think that this game is going to be out of hand. I think this is going to be a really, really close game, and McNeese fights back against Vanderbilt, but I just think Vanderbilt is just too hot right now. Had a really, really good showing in the SEC tournament. Made it all the way to the final before losing to who was it? I do think they ended up losing in the tournament. I just don't remember who they lost to. But I do remember it kind of being surprising that Vanderbilt was all the way in the SEC final. Maybe they even did win. I'm not even honestly that positive about what happened in the SEC tournament because I didn't watch it. I watched Ohio State games. Anyways, Troy and Nebraska. This is a really, really interesting game. If anyone has not paid any close attention to Nebraska, Nebraska is one of the programs that have still not won a March Madness NCAA bracket tournament game in their entire program's history. And honestly, it kind of makes sense. Nebraska has never been great at basketball historically, from what I can remember. Maybe they have and just kind of choked stuff away in the tournament. I know they've, of course, choked stuff away in the tournament, but what a game for this to be, because Troy is dangerous. Troy is a really, really dangerous team in this tournament. They could honestly make a run here. I don't think that they're going to be able to, though. I just think Nebraska's willpower and Nebraska and their players and their fans and their coaching staff have all been told about the same story about Nebraska never being able to get over the hump and win their first tournament game. So I think for that reason, I'm going to go with Nebraska over Troy, like Vanderbilt and McNeese. Very, very close. This could come down to a last-second shot. Honestly, I would not be surprised if any of those two teams, McNeese or Troy, win against a Nebraska or Vanderbilt. And then another really interesting game. This entire, south section here is death row. Any one of these teams can get knocked out in the first round, and your bracket could be done within the first couple of days of this tournament. So watch out if you're going to pick a champion from this section of the tournament. Watch out, because you are going to be on edge this entire month. But North Carolina and VCU. The thing with North Carolina is they are really, really good historically, of course. And they are still really good. And their only problem is injuries. They just lost their star player to an injury. And he, I think, is out for the majority of, if not the entire tournament, the majority of the tournament, in Caleb Wilson. In ESPN's Top 100, if you can see there, he is in ESPN's Top 100. And it's super, super hard for me to trust North Carolina to make a deep run in this bracket. And VCU is a dangerous, dangerous team. Like the past two other games, I would not be surprised if VCU completely handles North Carolina. And not even with the first two, but if VCU dominates North Carolina, I would not be surprised in the slightest. So I am going to go with North Carolina here, and it does have me nervous. But I do think that VCU has a shot. And anyone that does not say that VCU has a shot is either a North Carolina fan or they've never seen a game of basketball before, because injuries can flip games very, very quickly. And, that could very well be what happens to North Carolina. I think I trust them a little bit more in their coaching staff and the rest of their players. They would not be here. Caleb Wilson is he's not 2018 LeBron James, where he's carrying the guys that LeBron James carried to the finals that year. North Carolina is a really good team. Just in March Madness, I don't know what is going to happen. Playing devil's advocate here, I don't know if the pressure is going to get to them or not against a VCU team that really has nothing to lose. And North Carolina has everything to lose and basically nothing to gain. Because if North Carolina wins this game, everyone's going to be like, duh, you should have won. You're a 6 seed playing an 11 seed. You're North Carolina, and that is VCU. And VCU's looking at this game going, we can cement ourselves in the history books by beating North Carolina. And, that should be what the coaches are saying if you're VCU. You can go down in the record books. Obviously, you want to make a deep run, but even if you just beat North Carolina, people are going to talk about that for years and years to come. whether that be good or bad, you are still going to be talked about for years to come. So I would not be surprised if VCU is able to pull out a win against North Carolina. In fact, I'm kind of talking myself into picking VCU. I think I am going to hold off, though, and give North Carolina the W there. Now, Illinois and Penn, I do think Illinois easily wins there, and that is key for the next round. Keep that in mind. Illinois is rested, and they basically dominate Penn and move on. That is key right there. And then Texas A&M and St. Mary's. These 7 and 10 games kill me every year. I think I am going to go with Texas A&M just because St. Mary's has had a few runs. I think their luck unfortunately runs out here. Texas A&M, a really, really quality team, a good quality team, an SEC team. And, I think I just trust a little bit more of Texas A&M. I think there's something in the air that's like, just pick Texas A&M, go with your gut there. And, horns down. So, with the last pick, I think I am going to go Houston. Do think they get by Idaho fairly easily. Let me go back up to the West region, and where we go for Arizona and Long Island. Do we even need to ask? Arizona picks up the win against Long Island. We go to Vanderbilt, Villanova, and Utah State. Now, with this game, Utah State has burned me in the past. I picked Utah State a bunch of times in the first round, and they always burn me. Every year. With that being said, I do not trust Villanova. Villanova is not the same team that they were 10 years ago, where they were busy making Final Fours like it was nobody's business. They were not. I don't trust Villanova. They're finally back in the tournament, have a pretty good seed here. I think regardless, whoever wins this game, I think they do end up losing Arizona, spoiler. But I think I am just going to trust my gut and go with Utah State. And hopefully they just don't burn me again, because they've done it before, and I would not be surprised if they do it again. Wisconsin and High Point, really, really bad matchup for Wisconsin. High Point is a really, really good. They are basically good at everything Wisconsin struggles with. Wisconsin, I just think, is a little bit on, a little bit of a slow start here. Or not a slow start, but something about this game just has me off right now, if I'm being completely honest. I think I am still going to go with Wisconsin here, but I'm very, very nervous about that pick. Arkansas, Hawaii, same thing. I think I should just trust my gut and pick Arkansas, but this Hawaii team is dangerous, and they have a really, really good shot at beating Arkansas. And I actually do think that Arkansas won the SEC championship in the tournament this year. I could be wrong, but I think that is what happened. But yeah, you know what? I'm just going to trust my gut. I'm going to go with Arkansas, get the win over High Point. BYU, and then either Texas or NCSU. I think BYU easily beats either one of those teams. I don't think there's maybe Texas if Texas moves on, but Texas has just been way too inconsistent this year. I think BYU moves on pretty convincingly. Same thing with Gonzaga. I definitely think that they are a little bit underrated coming into this. Gonzaga has been consistently one of the top teams in the entire country over the past, let's go 10 years, honestly. They are really, really consistent when it comes to this tournament. They know what they're doing. Their coaching staff is very experienced on what it takes to win in this type of tournament. So I do think Gonzaga wins against Kennesaw State fairly easily. Miami and Missouri. If you're an Ohio State fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't even know. I don't even have to say anything. I can just. And you already know what I mean. This is a lose-lose for me. I honestly don't even care who wins, because I'm honestly not going to like any of these teams. Miami, if you don't know, if you're not a football fan, Miami knocked Ohio State out of the college football playoff last year. and went on to play Indiana in the national championship game, and did end up losing in that game, but still sung for Ohio State. The fact that Ohio State, honestly, if they beat Miami, they go to the national championship, and maybe they have a better shot at beating Indiana than Miami did. Maybe they still lose. Maybe they lose even worse, kind of like Oregon against Indiana. But still, sucks that Miami beat us when they did in that second round. And then Missouri, yet again, if you're not a football fan, if you're not an Ohio State fan, Missouri in 2023 beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Actually, both of those games against Ohio State for Miami and Missouri were both in the Cotton Bowl, which is funny for me. Actually, not really that funny, but ironic, I guess, is what I was looking for there. But Missouri beat Ohio State. I'm not going to go into all the quarterback injuries and everything because Missouri fans are just gonna get on me in the comments section about that. But I'm just gonna pick Miami. They're the higher seed. Moving on. Purdue against Queens. Purdue wins that pretty easily. I'm gonna talk more about Purdue in the next round. I just think that they're too much for Queens in that game, regardless of what you think they are. Purdue is consistent, consistency wise. And then going down, Michigan, blah 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 blah. Let's just move on. Michigan wins pretty easily, no matter who it comes out of the first four there. And then Georgia and St. Louis. This is interesting. Georgia is a type of team that likes to slow down the pace, be physical, and not really shoot a lot of threes. But when they do, they're pretty good at making them. I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. I mean, they're not terrible. Georgia does let a lot more in the bat. Oops, sorry. Georgia does allow more points per game, but that you have to factor in that St. Louis is not playing an SEC schedule. Regardless of what you think the SEC is in basketball, they are better than whatever conference that St. Louis is. So that is my only concern about that right there is Georgia defensively, but they are a lot more physical, and normally defense does travel, and offenses can be dangerous in this tournament. St. Louis is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the entire country, and that's why I'm kind of leaning St. Louis here, but do not be surprised if Georgia somehow irks this game out, and if it's a low-scoring game, I think Georgia has it. If St. Louis can shoot Georgia out of the building, they'll win by 20. So I think there's a lot more to do with this game than people are actually letting on. I do think that this is honestly kind of a bad matchup for Georgia, especially if St. Louis can start off hot, which is the reason why I am going to go with St. Louis here. Also, I think St. Louis is a better matchup for Michigan, and because Michigan just somehow gets the most insane luck, St. Louis beats Georgia and gives Michigan a little bit of an easier game in the second round than they would have, at least, in the against Georgia. Texas Tech and Akron. Akron, if you are not familiar with Akron, they just won the MAC championship, the tournament. They're hot right now. And Texas Tech, they're good. Obviously, they're a fifth seed for a reason. They're good. But I really, really like this Akron team. They kept it really, really close with Miami when Miami was on their hot streak. And it's really convenient that Akron was basically in a win-or-go-home situation in the tournament. If Akron does not win that tournament, or it makes a really, really far run in the tournament, they probably don't make it in, or they're one of the first four, like Miami is down here. But they didn't. They won the whole thing, and now they are an at-large bid, or not an at-large bid. They're in the tournament. They don't have to play in the first four versus what Miami, Ohio has to play in SMU in a few games. We'll get to that in a second. But I really, really like this Akron team. I really, really do. And for that reason, it's March. Let's go with it. I'm going to pick Akron to upset Texas Tech. And, call me insane if you want, but the insane games happen in March for a reason. This is why it's called March Madness. This is why we love this tournament. The unknown is what we crave for 365 days after the national championship ends. Alabama rolls in this game. I don't even know how to even Hofstra maybe. I don't even know. And then Tennessee and Miami of Ohio or SMU. I don't think Tennessee is great, honestly. But Miami, if a Miami Ohio somehow gets by SMU, I think Miami Ohio has a shot. If SMU defeats Miami Ohio, I think Tennessee kind of rolls away with this. And because of that, it's really down to who I think would win Miami of Ohio versus SMU. And Miami of Ohio has been on the, they have been on the border of losing so many games, and they've just been able to creep out the win, whether it was the last game against Ohio in the regular season in Athens, or the game against Toledo where Miami was able to squeeze out that win, or the game against Akron when Miami was able to do that as well. I just don't think that Miami is going to be able to do that. I don't think that Miami is going to be able to do that over and over and consistently. And for that reason, not only am I going to have Tennessee moving on in this game, but I don't even think Miami of Ohio gets to play Tennessee. I think SMU beats Miami of Ohio, and Tennessee ends up beating SMU. Virginia, I think, rolls Wright State, and Iowa State rolls Tennessee State. The 7-10 game is interesting because Kentucky, same thing with Utah State, same thing with McNeese. Honestly, same thing with North Carolina. They are one of the teams that have burned me in the past. And I'm petty. So for that reason, I'm going to go Santa Clara right there. Santa Clara, same thing with St. Louis, one of the better three-point shooting teams. I just don't trust Kentucky consistently to make a deep run in this game, in this tournament. And I'm petty. I'm sorry, I am. So for that reason, I'm going to have Santa Clara upsetting Kentucky in the 7-10 game and having them go play Iowa State in the round of 32. Let's go back up to the Duke Blue Devils and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And unfortunately for me, I think this is where Ohio State's run comes to an end. And Ohio State, if they can get by TCU, great. This is their first ever, this group's first time ever going to the March Madness tournament. And Duke is very experienced when it comes to this. They've been here before. They are the big bad in this game. And I just think that they are just too good. And of course, Ohio State has a shot. I've been seeing a lot of people say if Ohio State can get by TCU, they have a shot to beat Duke. But I just think with, and this is going to apply to a lot of these games that I'm going to predict here in a second. I just think that Duke, with them I think they're going to skate by in their first round game. But I think that Ohio State is going to have to tough out a win like they've kind of done all regular season. I just think that kind of catches up to them. So I think Duke gets by Ohio State. I think it's kind of similar to the Michigan game with Ohio State. I think Ohio State kind of starts off hot and Duke just kind of reels them in and pulls away in the last few minutes. So I think I have Duke going to the Sweet 16. And then I have St. John's in Kansas. And here's the thing with St. John's. Like I said, last year I predicted St. John's to not only make it to the NCAA championship, but win the whole thing. And I think they got to the Sweet 16, maybe even the Elite 8. And that was kind of when my bracket kind of fell apart there. And I told you I'm petty, but I don't think I can not pick St. John's there. Kansas, same thing with Duke, same thing with Gonzaga and Villanova from a little bit there. Kansas has been here before, but I think my gut is just telling me to go with St. John's, so that's what I'm gonna do. And then Michigan and South Florida, Michigan State. Sorry. Michigan State and South Florida. I do think I'm gonna go with Michigan State there. Good game by South Florida. If they can get past Louisville, I think they call that a pretty successful season, if I'm being completely honest. I just think Michigan State has the higher ceiling and the higher floor. And sometimes that doesn't matter, but I think in this game it does. Michigan State moves on. And then, oh man, my gut. Like I said before, I don't like UCLA. I don't like their coach. I root against them when they play. And it's nothing on the players. It's not like I don't like the players. I don't like the coach. But it's something weird about these 7 seeds and these 2 seeds, you know? I think UConn kind of trips up and kind of overlooks UCLA and kind of pencils themselves in to the game against Michigan State and kind of gets caught looking ahead, and that's what ends up killing them. I have UCLA moving on to play Michigan State in the Sweet 16. And then we'll go down to back to the South bracket here. And Florida, I think, handles Iowa. I think similar to the Ohio State Duke game, I think Iowa kind of keeps it close in the first half, and Florida pulls away in the second. Vanderbilt, Nebraska, I think Nebraska is kind of overhyped with their win against Troy and kind of gets caught up in that in their first ever tournament win. And I think Vanderbilt, who is still, like I said, really, really hot, handles Nebraska. And then this is where I think Illinois or North Carolina's injuries catch up with them. I think Illinois, same thing. I think Illinois and North Carolina, they have a close first half, but Illinois pulls away in the second half. Their injuries are just going to be too much here. North Carolina is not going to have a player to go to when they're down, and Illinois has the momentum. And there's just not going to be anybody that North Carolina is going to be able to go to. And Illinois defensively is really, really good. So for that reason, I am going to take Illinois to get to the Sweet 16. And then Houston, I think, is going to go. Houston is very weird with me. I think they're kind of on the same lines of teams that have burned me. But excuse me, we will see what happens with them. But I am going to just trust my gut there and go with the Cougars. And hopefully that doesn't burn me again, honestly. Where are we at? Arizona and Utah State. Like I said before in the first round, Arizona gets by Utah State. I think they get by either Villanova or Utah State. I don't think it really matters who wins that game. Arizona gets by. And then Wisconsin and Arkansas, I think a lot of people are overvaluing Wisconsin after their pretty decent Big Ten tournament run. They get destroyed by Ohio State. They're just not very consistent. They weren't very consistent in the regular season. I think because they had a really strong Big Ten tournament, I think that's why they're up here in the 5th seed. I am going to go with Arkansas to get the win there, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Arkansas. But I do like them a little bit more than Wisconsin. And then BYU and Gonzaga. I do have Gonzaga getting there. Gonzaga has been making Sweet 16s in their freaking sleep. So I'm not going to go away from that. I do think BYU has a shot in this game. It's not like they don't. But Gonzaga is just, they've been making at least the Sweet 16 in their sleep. So I am going to go with them to get that win over BYU in a slugfest, honestly. And then Purdue and Miami. I think I am going to go with Purdue. This is more personal yet again with the Mizzou and Miami game here. I am going to go with Purdue. I think they're hot off of their Big Ten title in the tournament, and I think they kind of use that momentum to propel them past Miami in the second round. And then we're going to go with Michigan, and we're going to go to Michigan in St. Louis. And yet again, like I said, I think Georgia is the better matchup if you want Michigan to lose. But I don't have Michigan playing Georgia. I've been playing St. Louis, and for that reason, I'm going to pick the Wolverines to get into the Sweet 16. And then this is where I might lose some people. I'm going to go with Akron. And Akron, and the reason for this is because Alabama does not play defense. They're an entirely offensive team. And if Akron can slow down Alabama, they have a really good shot at winning this game. Now, obviously, it's going to take a lot of guts and a lot of luck to get this win over Alabama. I think Akron is flying off of their MAC tournament win, and they beat Alabama and kind of become the Cinderella of this season. Tennessee and Virginia. Here's the thing with Tennessee. I like Tennessee. I have personal friends that go to Tennessee. And, you know, I have family that live down in Tennessee. If somebody asked me, Dylan, if you could not cheer for Ohio State and you had to cheer for somebody else, I would cheer for Tennessee. I like Tennessee. But that being said, I have to be objective here. I am going to pick Virginia to take down Tennessee. They're just not as dangerous as they had the Tennessee. Tennessee has not just been as dangerous oh good grief. Tennessee is not as dangerous as they've been in past years. There we go. Finally got it. Sorry about that. Stick with me here. This is a long video. I do think that Santa Clara, yet again, is kind of coming off of the stunner that they pulled against Kentucky. I think either way, if Kentucky or Santa Clara wins this game, I think Iowa State kind of rolls them, regardless of who wins in that. We'll go back up to the Duke Blue Devils and the St. John. I don't even know what St. John's mascot is, so I'm not even going to try. Jeez, give me 1 second. I got my notes over here. Sorry if I'm looking over here. Sorry about that. I'm just looking. I have a whole page of notes over here, so that's what I'm looking at. But I am going to go with the Duke Blue Devils over St. John's. St. John's has burned me before. I'm not going to let it happen again. Duke moves on. And then, yet again, we'll just go over. We'll just do this. Arizona and Purdue and Gonzaga, and we'll just do this just so it's easier and I don't have to do less scrolling. Yet again, like I said, I don't like it, but I have to be objective. Michigan State is not consistent at all. I think teams have kind of found something in Michigan State that Michigan exposed in them. And I'm going to go with UCLA. And they are going to be the one of the lowest seeds in the last few rounds here. A really, really good team. Both of these are really good teams. Obviously, both are in the Big Ten now. But I just think that UCLA has a little bit more consistency than Michigan State does. Maybe a little bit even of a higher floor, even though Michigan State does have the higher ceiling, of course, in this game. I just don't think that matters. I think matchup-wise, I just like UCLA a little bit more in this game. And weird things happen in March. You also have to keep that in mind. Same thing, or not even same thing. I am just going to go with Arizona here over Arkansas. I think the Arkansas-Hawaii game and the Arkansas-Wisconsin game are going to be bloodbaths. I think Arkansas might wear out a little bit. And Arkansas can definitely take that momentum into winning both of these games and propel that into a win against Arizona. I just think that they might tire out here, and Arizona plays Long Island and Utah State or Villanova. Just off of that, I think Arizona is going to be a lot more rested. So for that reason, I am going to go with Arizona there. And with Purdue and Gonzaga, let me talk about Purdue here. And Purdue coming off of the Big Ten tournament. Everyone is super high on them. They beat Michigan, a team that a lot of people have considered to be the best team in the country. Of course, Michigan being the best defensive team in the country. one of the better offensive teams in the country. A lot of people's pick to win this whole thing. And, you know, a lot of people are taking Purdue for what they could be instead of what they are. What they are is a very, very inconsistent team. A team that lost to Ohio State and kind of crept their way into the Big Ten championship tournament and, you know, kind of flew underneath the radar. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, Purdue's there. I don't think that is going to happen in this tournament. I think whoever comes out in the Sweet 16 is going to take Purdue very seriously. I think Michigan kind of was overlooking Purdue, and Purdue came out and punched in the mouth, and credit to Purdue in that game. But I just think Gonzaga comes in and beats Purdue and sends Purdue home pretty convincingly in this game. So let me go to Florida and Vanderbilt. I do think, let me go to my notes here. I do have a little bit more notes on the games. I did not do a whole bracket or anything like that. I just have a few notes on like what games would come off of this and this and this happened and this happened. So these teams have obviously matched up before in the regular season. Let me see if they have that in here. Let me see. So Vanderbilt and Florida actually split. So Vanderbilt, according to this at least, they might have played another game that they're just not showing. But Vanderbilt lost at Florida or at home, 98-94 in January of this year in the regular season, and then in the SEC tournament, Vanderbilt knocked out Florida pretty convincingly. I think this is a revenge spot for Florida. They come back and beat Vanderbilt. I think it's another one of, I think Vanderbilt keeps it close, but I think Florida ends up pulling away with free throws and defensively. And defensive stops, rather. Sorry, not defensively. Defensive stops. And then Illinois and Houston. This is going to come back to just who I trust more. I trust Houston a little bit more than I trust Illinois. And I could very, very well change my mind on this. I do think I kind of lean a little bit towards Houston, but someone could honestly tell me something, a stat that I just have not seen yet, and I could flip this pick very, very easily. And we'll just move over to Virginia and Iowa State, and I'm pretty sure I have this actually written down as a game. I do. And I like Virginia. I don't think that they are a national championship threat, honestly. Just off of pure gut. I've not watched any of these guys' games. I don't even think I really even watched the Ohio State-Virginia game, honestly. I think yet again, it's going to come down to who I trust more, and I think I trust Iowa State a little bit more than I trust Virginia. And yet again, I'm going to say it. I'm going to lose people, but this is March. Crazier things have happened. And yes, as an Ohio State fan, am I thinking optimistically? Obviously. But this is going to be my surprise of the tournament. I'm going to have Akron upset the Michigan Wolverines. And here's why. I think the same thing that happened with Michigan State is exactly what's going to happen to Michigan. Michigan State is going to get caught basically laughing at Michigan, or Michigan is going to get caught laughing at Michigan State and their failures to not make the Elite Eight. And they're going to get caught looking ahead to maybe Iowa State. I don't know. It obviously depends on when these games happen. But I do think that if Akron can get this far, I think this will be probably one of the last games on of the week. It'll be in a primetime slot, more than likely, versus the Michigan State game that's not going to attract a lot of viewers, of course, apart from Michigan State fans. But this will have national eyes on it, and I think Michigan is just going to overlook they're just going to overlook Akron. And they are not, and Michigan fans, you're not guilty of doing this. You did it against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship tournament, and you ended up winning that game, and then you lose to Purdue because you overlooked them. you lose to Wisconsin, and they got hot at the right time. And that, I believe, and then you lose to Duke, who honestly was just the better team that day. I think if Michigan and Duke kind of go, if they play 10 times, I think they both win 5. Maybe one wins 6 and one wins 4, but it's very even. But I just think that Akron, if they can get hot at the right time and catch Michigan lacking, and maybe they survive against Alabama, Michigan is just kind of like, they just got lucky. We'll get them here, and on to Iowa State it is, and Michigan gets caught lacking, and next thing they know, the buzzer's going off, and Akron is the one celebrating. So I do think the Akron Zips upset the Michigan Wolverines, and I could be looking back at this, and Texas Tech blows out Akron, and my whole bracket is done, which is fine by me. Like, this is not a thing where I'm going to be like, I need this bracket to be perfect in every sense of the word. No, this is fun, and this is March. This is what we do when it is March Madness season. We try and have fun. No one wants to pick all 1 seeds to go to the Final Four and just have the top 2 teams battle it out. That's not fun. If it was that, Michigan and Duke would be my championship, and I'd probably have Michigan winning the national championship. Honestly, if you told me you had to pick somebody, or you would, like, if your life depended on it, you say, Dylan, your life depends on you picking a national champion from this bracket, I'd honestly tell you Michigan. I'd be like, bet my money on Michigan. And honestly, I can see myself being right. I think more than likely Michigan wins this national championship. I think they're that dangerous. They don't have the overall seed curse that they were projected to have. If they would have beat Purdue, they would have been the number 1 overall seed most likely. And I just think that weight is kind of lifted off their shoulders. They have a chip on their shoulder now, and Dusty May is going to have them ready. And I think more than likely Michigan does win this entire tournament. I just don't think that's very fun. And as an Ohio State fan, I can't do that. So I'm going to go with Akron to beat the Michigan Wolverines and move on to the Elite Eight. That being said, Iowa State doesn't overlook Akron. They handle them, and their Cinderella story ends there. And then that game is tough for me, honestly. I think I am just going to go with Florida here. Just because, yet again, I'm petty, and Houston has burned me before, and I don't want that really to happen again. And I have them making a deep run. I just don't trust them to make it all the way to the Final Four. And then right here, I think this is where this would make me extremely mad if I'm actually right about this, but I think Duke ends UCLA's season right there, and they move on. And then this Arizona and Gonzaga game is really interesting to me. Honestly, if Michigan gets knocked out, I think this is the bona fide national championship pick right here. This is the bona fide national championship game. And for that reason, Arizona is just one of the more consistent teams in the country that we've honestly had in a while. And, I think I trust that a little bit more. So I think I'm going to go with Arizona here. And they move on to the Final Four. So that is my Final Four. Duke, Florida, Arizona, and Iowa State. Not the most crazy thing, but I'm gonna roll with it here. A number 2 seed has not won the national championship in a very, very long time, so I am gonna go with Arizona there. And I am gonna go with the defending national champions, the Florida Gators. And that's just, I think Florida is kind of similar to what Gonzaga was a few years ago, when Gonzaga was the number 1 overall seed, was undefeated in a shortened season, but still was undefeated, went all the way to the national championship game, and then Baylor beat them. I think Florida, once they get by Vanderbilt, kind of steamrolls their way to the Final Four. And I know there's only one game in between that in my bracket here, but I just think that they survived Duke, and I don't trust Duke as the number 1 overall seed. And like I said before, it's not fun to pick the number 1 overall seed to make it all the way to the national championship game and to win the national championship game. Because honestly, if Duke makes it, they might just win. And, call me a hypocrite for having number one seeds, both or two number one seeds in the national championship. I don't care. But I think, like Gonzaga against Baylor, I think Florida runs out of gas. And I'm going to go with the Arizona Wildcats to go all the way to Indianapolis, beat Iowa State, beat Duke, or beat Florida, and win the national championship. And just for fun, we'll go 116. Or 116, there we go, as the total number of points. Because why not? So, that is my March Madness projections. If you guys want me to, I will do a reactions to how my bracket is going. If it obviously gets absolutely wrecked, I probably won't do any more updates. But, for the first few rounds, I will check in with you guys. And please let me know how stupid I am in the comments and how I should have flipped this game and given this and said this, blah, 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 blah. I obviously probably missed these things. Like it says in the title, I'm a basketball casual. Please do not take anything I say or take everything that I said with a grain of salt. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching if you have made it this far. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.